Very simply, I became affiliated or became aware of Phi Kappa Tau when I came to Ohio State. I went through the usual rush proceedings and was honored when I was asked to join Phi Kappa Tau. A great bunch of guys that I pledged with and that we served our pledgeship with, and went through Hell Week together. That's what we called them in those days, and that's exactly what it was. But we're very close as a matter of that. I still communicate with those. That's how it started as far as Ray Bichimer and Phi Kappa Tau was concerned. And the chapter was very, very good to me, and right down the line. I became treasurer. I never became president. Went on and, of course, joined a legal fraternity when I went on to law school, and became, forget what the title is, but I worked with dear Frank Musrush, who many of you probably know and recall. And Frank told me that I was going to be the secretary of the Gamma Educational Foundation. I said, no, I can't be, because I am not a member. I never paid. He says, yes, you are. I paid for you. And so, therefore, I got to be Uncle Frank, as we used to be known, or he used to be known to us. And so I did that for a while, and then, of course, I believe I also was the president of the Alumni Association. And then, with the goodness of Ewing Bowles, he asked me to get involved in the national fraternity, actually, and the foundation. And Ewing goes back with my wife's family. Ewing and my father-in-law were affiliated with the same company, with the Ohio Company and the Ohio National Bank. My father-in-law was, matter of fact, it's kind of, I remember this, and it was scary at the time. When I became engaged to my wife, Ewing Bowles found out about it and went into George's office, my future father-in-law, and he said, well, you're going to get some class in your family now. Your daughter's going to marry a Phi Tau. Well, you know, I had the usual concerns about what my new father-in-law was going to think about that. It was okay. It worked out well. But at any rate, from that point on, Ewing Bowles and I were very good friends, and Ewing got me involved in the foundation, put me on in the foundation board, and from that, through that, I became involved in the national fraternity, and then worked in the national fraternity and became national president, which I had to give up my position to the foundation, which was fine. I had served president of the foundation for, I don't want to say 4 or 6 years, I'm not sure exactly, but then became national president. My 2-year term as national president was probably 2 of the best years of my life. I spent a lot of time on it, obviously. I traveled around the country visiting most all, I didn't see all the chapters, but a lot of those chapters. And my law partners were very tolerant and very patient with me and allowing me to go and do this and take the time to do it. But met a lot of wonderful people, and we just stayed in touch from that point on. And many of the people, and I continue to be somewhat active in the national fraternity. And I'm now not quite as active as I'd like to be anymore, but I still stay in contact. I observed the undergraduates working and doing these kinds of things. They didn't always do them the same way that I thought they should have done them, and all I could do is say, here's the way I think you ought to do it, gentlemen, give it a shot. Sometimes they did, sometimes they didn't. Most of the times, I think, kind of with my children, sooner or later they came around. That's what it boils down to. Said that, kept that same approach from a business standpoint. Take it right down the line and do what you want to do, but make sure you do it right. That was always what I tried to put that lesson across to the fellows in the fraternity, and most of the time it really worked. Of course, I can't talk further, but I can't talk about Gamma Chapter without talking about our host mother, Mrs. Mitchell. And most everybody at this meeting is probably going to remember Mom Mitchell. She came back a couple of times after when I was there and so forth. And one favorite story of mine is that I remember when we moved into the new house. By the way, that was another interesting experience that I can probably was that watching the old house being torn down and watching the new house go up. I stayed a summer to watch the house go down and the new house go up. And then I was the treasurer. We moved into the new house. And we were obviously on a limited budget, and I walked into the living room, and on the mantle was a very nice floral piece, not necessarily flowers, but greens and so forth, decorative in nature. And I said, Mom, I said, what did that cost? And she mentioned, $30 or $25. And I said, what? She said, well, it's a potted plant. I said, wait a minute, $25 for a pitted potted plant. Don't you think that's a little bit off the wall? No, she did not think so. When Mom Mitchell came to our wedding, guess what wedding gift we got from Mom Mitchell? We got a pitted potted plant. And she made damn sure that I knew where that came from. So that's my favorite Mom Mitchell story. But she was so wonderful with everybody. And I have to say, my mother was somewhat, not having any experience with fraternities, my mother was somewhat reluctant when I said I wanted to join a fraternity. I joined anyhow. She came down and visited from Cleveland. I was born and raised in Cleveland. She came down. When she met Mrs. Mitchell, it was okay. From then on, she knew that her little Ray was in good hands, and nothing was going to happen to him. Little did she know. But at any rate, that's our Mom Mitchell, and to this day, I'll be always grateful to her. And she's when my fraternity affiliations were affiliations of brotherhood, and I have a lot of other. I was active in all kinds of organizations, the JCs, the Sertoma Club, you name them, all kinds of stuff. There is no relationship that is similar to than your fraternity brothers, because you spent so much time with them and you went through so much with them and you exchanged so many crazy ideas and did so many crazy things. And I do wish every one of you, everybody here, just a very happy anniversary. Be grateful for your fraternity experience, enjoy it, and enjoy the weekend.
I joined Phi Kappa Tau in the fall of 1953, and that's a long time ago. It's 2012 now, and next month I'll be 77. But I joined it and prospered in it and really appreciated it. So that was 59 years ago. And for 37 years, I stayed active in Phi Kappa Tau until I resigned as Board of Governors member in the spring of 1990. And you might ask, why did I spend all that 37 years being active in Phi Kappa Tau? Well, it was because I was excited and charged up being in the fraternity chapter, and I wanted to give back. I put out the Gamma Ray newsletter for 35 years. I wrote a history of the fraternity in 1990, which covered from the Booster Club in 1911 until I resigned as a Board of Governors member when I was 55 in the spring of 1990. So those great memories I have of the fraternity. Well, it was the year they built the fraternity house, and we met in an old house up the street while the new house was being built. And when we moved into the house in the fall of '54, we were so proud of that structure that Union Bowles had built. The land and the house cost about $175,000, and due to his generosity, we only had about a $62,000 mortgage left, which we could handle. And so we rushed that fall of '54, and we showed everyone, this is our living room, this is our chapter room, our kitchen, and we showed them the house, and we pledged 16 or 18 people. The next year, in the fall of '55, we did the same thing. We showed them our living room and our chapter room and where we did things around the house, and we pledged 16 or 18 people. But the third year, in the fall of 1956, we were used to the house. The house was a background. It made its statement. But we rushed the individuals. We told them about the fraternity and what it could do, where were they from, what were their interests, and we pledged the largest pledge class in the history of Ohio State University. 56 fall pledges, and we had 6 holdover pledges from spring quarter, made a total of 62, and there were only 50 guys in the chapter, so that took us up to 112 members. And Phi Tau was never the same since that happened. It had made its mark at the university. Incidentally, my little brother in that large pledge class was John Edwards, and in the 106-year history of Phi Kappa Tau and over 88,000 initiates, John Edwards is our most honored and notable athlete in the history of the fraternity through his 14-year Major League career. I attended 2 World Series he played in, but I always remember, John, that Columbus North always beat his high school of Columbus West. I played for Columbus North. In the early 60s and in the late 60s, Phi Kappa Tau was probably in the top 2 or 3 fraternities on campus, but you couldn't say we were number 1 at that point. And then 1971 came along, and the students were being recruited or conscripted into the Army to fight in Vietnam, and there was a big rebellion. They were just rebelling all over the country, and they closed Ohio State down for 2 or 3 weeks at the end of the spring quarter because of the disharmony there. And it was difficult for any organization to attract students. They were all rebelling. At the student union, the Ohio Union, no one wanted to take part in anything. The fraternities couldn't get anyone to join them. So it was a difficult year, and in the spring of that year, we had about 7 or 8 seniors move out of the fraternity house as they graduated, and we were going to be in strict financial trouble the next year. And I think the Board of Governors took action that was one of the most creative and the most necessary things we ever did. We had a great president named Bob Strong. He later graduated Phi Beta Kappa, and he went in medical school and he became a surgeon. And we persuaded Bob to forego the summer job he had all lined up and to instead spend full time rushing for the fraternity all summer. And I'm sure he and his dad had reservations about that, but we provided his room the next year, and we provided his gas and expenses traveling around the state. And that fall, Phi Kappa Tau pledged 18 men. The next largest pledge class was 10, and the average pledge class that fall was 6. That saved us, that move, and Bob did such a great job. And actually, the university hadn't built enough dorms, and they allowed freshmen to move into fraternity houses during that era. And I think about 6 or 7 of those pledges moved into the fraternity house, and that saved us financially. I think Bob Mintz was one of those. And then we had Bob Mintz follow him as president of the chapter, and you know the caliber of Bob is. I won't go into that. And so I found out in my years with the fraternity that if we had 2 strong presidents in a row, the fraternity prospered. If we had a strong president, a weak president, a strong president, it went along about as usual. If we had 2 weak presidents in a row, the fraternity definitely fell off and suffered. So you guys in the undergraduate chapter, you need to really plan who's a good leader among your members, not just your favorite old Joe, to lead the fraternity. And in the 1980s also, we had not only the IFC chairman, but we also had the president elected of the whole undergraduate Ohio State student body the same year. Rich Gould was that president. And we also, I think, had more men from high school that had been scholar athletes in their high school. Last thing I want to mention is that I think the fraternity needs strong alumnus supervision. It needs someone there that knows 3/4 of the people by name, at least. It needs someone that can say no once in a while when these energetic guys have some idea that wouldn't be best for the chapter, like building another door on the side of the house out to the deck or something. No, you just can't do that. So the fraternity needs a strong alumnus that will be up there 2 times a week, knows all the guys, and can help make decisions to help these guys mature and run the fraternity. Or else, every 10 or 12 years, we're going to have National say, oh yes, you can be the new founding fathers to reorganize Gamma chapter. So those are some of my reflections on looking back of my 37 years associated with the chapter out of the 100 years that we're celebrating today.
If somebody says Gamma of Phi Kappa Tau to you, what's the first thing that comes to mind?
Oh, just all the friends, all the associations, all the people that I've met, you know, lifelong friendships, people that continue to be a part of my life. So when you say Gamma Phi Kappa Tau, and what does that remind you of? It just kind of starts the floodgates, really, and you can go on forever. And you ask about how the fraternity was back in my day, again, 68, 69, 70. we had a very strong fraternity. We had strong academics, but we also had good basketball, football. We had good intramural teams. Unfortunately, we finished second 2 years in a row for the intramural football championships. We had 2 or 3 good basketball teams each year. We had a wonderful time competing in intramurals. We never had parties in the house. We never had parties in the house. They were always someplace else. Sometimes we were smart enough to rent buses for the party. So the fraternity was a very, it was a safe place. I mean, we made mistakes, but we made them in the company of friends and with some measure of adult supervision. Our house mother, Mom Mitchell, bless her heart, we all thought she was cranky and a prude, but the truth is we all loved her, and we very much enjoyed the time we'd go down in her suite and sit on the floor in front of her television and watch the Smothers Brothers or whatever it was that we all sometimes gathered to watch. It was a good place to kind of spread your wings and establish your own identity and learn your way from a place of relative safety, if not complete safety. Obviously, we all made a lot of mistakes. But I've spent a life, not necessarily in politics, but in public service. I've worked for city, state, county government. I've run for office. I've actually served in an elective office and even won an election once. Actually, twice I won an election. The one thing that I learned back in the fraternity house was you can work with everybody, you don't have to be best friends with everybody, and you can have disagreements and fights with people and then come back the next day and still work together and still be friends again and still be on the same team and pulling in the same direction. So they were some very good years. The troubles that Phi Tau has gone through, in my view, have to do with the lack of alumni support at critical points in their life. And I suppose I was partly guilty, but I had stepped away from it after a while. I'd been involved, stepped away, others were doing it. I thought others were doing it. And it turned out that others weren't doing it. And, you know, it's a learning laboratory, it's a leadership laboratory, it's a laboratory in terms of how to work in groups and how to work together. Well, and obviously you graduate and you know, you may come back for a homecoming or two, but then you move on with your life and you're making a life. I didn't marry until somewhat later, and we don't have any kids, but a lot of people are raising families and burning the candle at both ends, I suppose, and so they forget about, or they don't have time to spend. And I was like that. I didn't have much to do with the fraternity for a long time, but then some people who were serving on the Board of Governors said, you should come back and serve on the Board of Governors. And really, my good friends Fred Mills and Steve Stover kind of encouraged me to do that, and because it was they who asked, I did it. And then I eventually became the treasurer of the House Corporation, because there was somebody who, they needed a treasurer, and I thought, well, you know, this will be a good way to teach myself how to use Quicken. So again, you look back and you think, did we really live like that? But you also look back and say, did we really do those stupid things? And did we make those mistakes? And so from the vantage point of looking back, you think, well, it's good that we have alumni involved and a Board of Governors involved that can say, you think that's the best idea, or have you thought about doing it this way? So I think that's an important thing for the fraternity, and I hope we'll never go through a time like we did in the fall of 2007, when there was essentially only 2 members of the Board of Governors functioning, and they weren't really functioning, and they didn't provide the leadership and the support that the chapter needed. You know, there but for the grace of God, any one of us could screw up a chapter. And as we think back to our fraternity days and what we did and some of the people that we became great friends with, but some of the bad decisions that we made, any group of us could have driven the fraternity down the drain, but for others that help us keep on the right track and give second thoughts to some of the decisions that we were making. So I think what we really need is to have strong committed alumni support for the success of Gamma Chapter.